Hopefully this will work. I just said, welcome to story time with Reverend Jamie. Oh, you're right, Mary. My hair is special. Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm going to try to sit up as high as possible so that it won't be on the camera. So sorry, Internet. This might be the most scandalous thing on the Internet today. I won't even come close. All right. Tent Makers, Chapter 9. James Tyler Robertson, very official. I had a better title, and I'll tell you at the end of it, but they titled it, Being a Professor in the City and a Pastor in the Country. I had a much better title. In my living room hangs a picture of St. Thomas Aquinas. The picture is right there. I'll show you on the internet a little bit later on, but that hangs in my living room. He has a well-lined face and a mouth that is turned down, and his mournful eyes look up and to the right, reminding me of the famous line in Ecclesiastes, with much wisdom comes much sorrow. But his hands always grab my attention. In his left hand is an open book, open in such a way that the viewer can read the red and black lettering inside. In his right hand is a building, presumably a church, that is tall enough to extend from his lower torso to just above the top of his shaven head. This artistic interpretation of the famous medieval scholar provides my visual mission statement as a bivocational minister and professor. The academy, represented by the book, finds true purpose only in service to the church. Without the right hand, the left hand would be content to remain poring over books, concerned only with academic theories that excite the minds of intellectuals. The right hand forces the left to ask the question, how does this actually impact the lives of church people? On the other side, the church benefits from the critical thinking that the academy demands of all of her children. Such thinking can combat harmful or vapid theology, move leadership beyond shifting trends, and assist the laity in their personal theological reflections. If I may be permitted to change Jesus' maxim from Matthew chapter 6, verse 3, it is crucial in this tent-making ministry for the left and the right hands to very much know what the other is doing. When I first learned of this project, I must confess that I did not see myself as bivocational because both vocations intersect seamlessly enough to appear, on first look, to be like two sides of the same coin. Upon further examination, a deeper reality became apparent. Both jobs require different skill sets, have different and sometimes competing emphases, and have language and wisdom that cannot be found in the other. Therefore, this chapter will focus on my role as a pastor-professor who works in a Toronto-based university while also serving two small Baptist churches in the rural countryside of southwestern Ontario. This chapter will be broken into three sections: family, rhythm, and change. The family section will speak of my origins at Westover and Mountsburg Baptist churches, how these communities changed my perspective on the role of pastor, and how letting go of my program ideas transformed a church community into a faith family. The rhythm section, through the lens of a church picnic, will explain the wisdom of the rural landscape and how that changed my theology of mission. Finally, I will explain how my academic expertise has provided new opportunities for lifelong Christians to change their known and loved Sunday morning worship experience. The argument of this chapter is that my academic study and lived experiences in Westover and Mountsburg have given me a more robust definition of church. This chapter, like the painting of Aquinas, is about finding balance between the theories of the academy and the realities of the church. Still with me? Still good? Everybody good? Everybody good? If you're on the line, you know I'm saying this. Family. Midway through my doctoral studies, I moved to the countryside of Flamborough to begin my time as a pastor of a rural two-point charge. This meant that I would be the pastor of two connected, though separate and distinct, faith communities. Mountsburg and Westover have been connected since the times of their respective origins in the 1840s. They were teaching churches where young seminarians would, quote, cut their teeth on preaching, home and hospital visits, board meetings, and other activities that make up church ministry. I was among the most experienced of the recent hires, as I already had worked in a variety of churches over the years and possessed a master's divinity degree already. These communities are generous and gracious and possess a wisdom and patience that comes from knowing that they outlast any minister that graces their pulpit for a season. They enjoyed their ministers, were supportive of them, and basically showed young up-and-comers the ropes, all the while knowing that someday soon these people would move on to other churches. It took me about 2 years to realize that these churches were not stepping stones to something bigger or better. These churches were about the best communities one could hope to lead. And that realization came following a meeting I had with one of my denominational leaders as I struggled with personal and professional issues. As I wondered about my future, his sage advice was, pastor them how to pastor you. And that altered the dynamics of our communities. I have cried in front of these people so many times. They have seen me preach while struggling with my own faith. They have waited patiently while I left mid-sermon to go change a diaper. And they have cooked for me, called me, hugged me, and healed me. These are patient people who are used to teaching their pastors. Sure, I didn't need as much advice on sermon preparation. I needed more help in my daily life. For all my Greek lessons, historical references, and biblical knowledge, I can honestly say that it was these red brick churches that showed me why the gospel is called good news and why church attendance is so important. My studies reduced my mental and emotional energy and made it impossible to accomplish all the big plans I had for these little communities. Like all pastors, I had dreams to make something more of these churches. And growing up in the city, that usually meant bringing busy and different people together to experience the communal elements that church can offer through programs, creative events. But this was not to be the case with the rural churches I was pastoring. These are the hardest working people I have ever met. They learned long ago that the only way to succeed in the cold climate of Canada is through cooperation and community. They relish social time with each other, and for some, that social time requires a spiritual gravitas not necessarily present in Optimists, Lions, Women's Institutes, or other rural social organizations. My outreach programs fell by the side because these two churches did not need instruction in community building. They were hungrier to see how their faith really mattered in daily life. Authenticity, more than events or expertise, carried the day, and their grace set me free to see the stories of salvation and redemption in my own mistakes, and bring such lessons into my Sunday morning messages, and, more importantly, in my Monday to Saturday interactions as well. This has been a very difficult path, and I have frequently questioned my pastoral worthiness. But it has also taught me that as soon as one thinks he or she is ready for ministry, that is a pretty good indication that the exact opposite is true. Pastoring them to pastor me set me free to be a more authentic version of myself and finally understand my preaching professor's line. For all the reasons people attend church, the only question they have is this: have you seen God, and what does God look like? As any of us who have walked with God long enough realize, we tend to see God clearer in our struggles. Those very struggles sparked my theological reflection and my community's acceptance of my very flawed humanity, and led us all to a shared personal growth. When people ask me how I'm able to pastor two churches with all my busy academic responsibilities, I reply, I don't actually lead two churches. I belong to two families. Rhythm. Still recording? Good. It was not until I began my rural ministry that I understood how important Jesus' carpentry was to his ministry. I also learned that a city guy teaching agricultural parables to farmers is all the wrong kinds of audacity. After one very thorough and profound message on the parable of the sower, a member of the church told me, quote, I like the stuff about Jesus you just said. The farming stuff was all wrong, but the Jesus stuff was nice, end quote. Shook my hand, clapped me on the back, and walked out of the church. If ever a compliment put me in my place, that was the one. And that compliment was uttered by none other than Mr. Tom Gillespie. At a Mountsburg picnic, I casually mentioned how much I wanted corn on the cob. I knew I would get Teresa laughing right off the bat. I was greeted by a collective outburst of laughter before someone finally relieved my confusion and my confused expression by informing me, it's not corn season yet. At another time, I was having coffee with a member of Westover, and we were talking about the weather and the work he was planning for the upcoming winter. I asked him why he was not doing such things sooner, and he simply replied, that's what the winter is for. We can't do much with the land, so we take care of the other stuff. It took a while for the profundity of these two stories to set in. Growing up in a city, I could eat what I want, pretty much when I want it. But farmers know the rhythms of crops, the rhythm of life. For most of my life, and due in no small part to my discipline as a historian, time has been a linear construct. A linear construct with little predictability, a collection of experiences and events that are related to actions and consequences, but also have unbelievable ability to surprise and shock. Much of my counseling and teachings on the importance of faith have come from reminding people that the tragedies of life are rarely predictable and can strike quite easily on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. Historiography itself teaches that many have studied the past in order to detect patterns in human movements, to see if predicting the future is possible from a scientific standpoint. Despite those who claim to have discovered that the world repeats itself every several centuries or so, as far as I can tell, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, is as close as we can come to offering insights into what is yet to be. And that has helped my academic pursuits. As historians, we never attempt to predict the future. However, I have struggled to use this perspective in helpful ways in ministry, especially when genuine tragedy occurs. Sitting in the kitchen of a woman whose son was recently murdered stands out as a time when my understanding of life seemed inadequate to the task before me. That unbelievably heavy moment, paired to the comical corn incident and the fairly innocuous conversation about winter chores, offered new insight, and interestingly enough, practical application that my theories had failed to do. Eating food that is in season and saving certain jobs for certain times of year taught me that the rhythm of life is seasonal, not strictly linear. If suffering is winter, then the person should be set free to feel all the feelings that come with winter, knowing all the while that spring is coming, even if we don't know exactly when. After the senseless death of a child, agony descends as unbidden and unavoidable as the winter season. Loneliness, cold, darkness, and the inability to handle previous tasks define this season of life, as ominous and never-ending as that season can appear. Rhythm offers a quiet reminder that spring will eventually arrive, just as stubbornly as winter. Thus, the Sorrowful Kitchen became a conversation about embracing the activities and thoughts that can only be done in a season of mourning. Heartache can be embraced. Loneliness and anger become a facet of everyday life, just like the snows of winter. Sometimes so forceful that one can only see or hear the storm. At other times, the sadness was calmer, but nevertheless all around, just like the snow remains on the ground and in the bare tree branches on even the sunniest of winter days. The rhythm of grief does, somewhat counterintuitively, lead to healing and joy, an internal spring in which we begin to see the point of re-experiencing life. Spring leads into the joy and sunshine of summer, a season of other activities. Then comes the inevitable pull of autumn that yields more crops, a season of hard work in which we reflect and gain wisdom and insight provided by the activities of the other seasons. Thus, in the words of Ecclesiastes again, everything has a season, and there is a time for everything under heaven. A rhythmic understanding combats the trite, because it does not pat the grief-stricken on the back and push them towards feeling better. It does not hurry through Good Friday or Holy Saturday, but sees the necessity in that despair, a beautiful despair that makes Easter Sunday so much better. As strange as this may sound, not being able to eat corn in June taught me how to sit with people who experience loss or terror and see the power in their personal winter. It grants me permission to sit in silent sadness, knowing that words can no more move a person toward healing than my longing for warmer days can shorten winter. It gives the grieved permission to simply sit in the sadness and reject the pressure to get better or do something. These patient people, attuned to the rhythm of our world and dependent on the attitude of the earth for their living, show me the patience and humility that must come to all of us living in this beautiful, fractured, seasonal world. This earth wisdom show me why Jesus pointed to seeds, birds, gusts of wind, or patches of dirt to show people the deep truths of the cosmos. It helped me see the redemptive power of the incarnation, because despite the teachings of many believers throughout history, this world is not doomed or damned or dirty, but is the displayer of God's salvation for those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Honestly, it has kept me from buying corn on the cob in January, because I know that this is a food that is out of season. While immediately gratifying, eating out of season robs me of the chance to experience the rhythm of life established by God. In other words, and thanks to Teresa, corn is a sermon to me now. And that's what I wanted. It was the chapter. This was going to be the Sermon of the Corn, but they changed it. They changed it, editors. All right, wrapping up. I don't want to create the impression that my rural pastorate is all sunshine and wonders of earthly wisdom. My other job as a professor has helped my faith families grow as well. The more I study the history of the Christian faith, the more I begin to realize that deep movements are not about numbers or influence, but about small collections of people genuinely following their faith. One summer, many years ago, we began to forego the traditional sermon time and moved our services into the basement of Mountsburg and the back room of Westover. We would still gather to sing and pray, but the latter half of the service was dedicated to conversations related to matters of faith. Since it was summer, when new ideas could be more easily embraced, people seemed to enjoy the novelty of it all. At first, we left it wide open, but sometimes that brought us into tangents and inconsequential conversations. In the end, we discovered a productive blend of brief reflection from me, followed up by a time of discussions about topics of faith. We talked openly about the struggles of aging. We spent 4 weeks discussing whether or not church actually matters, or if faith can grow outside the structures of religion. We challenged and discussed the notion that Jesus is the only way to heaven. By the end of the summer, most people wanted to maintain that rhythm, but that is what we've been doing, and that is what we've been doing for over half a decade now. This has really challenged people, and some have left because of it. Pushing back against my elders on beliefs that I think are more cultural than biblical has created some tense moments, but also some real vulnerability and real growth. I truly believe these moments have only been possible because our churches are small and because everyone knows each other really well. This is where my ability to think on my feet and lean heavily on my studies has served my people well. I can go into a Sunday morning confident that I have years of education and teaching experience from which to draw. I know how ideas and people have shaped Christianity, and that allows my people, many of whom have been faithful for over 7 decades, didn't say here, to see their Jesus, hopefully, in new ways. I spend less time in my study reading books for Sunday and more time just getting to listen to the collective faith present around the table each week. Members of our little church openly share with each other where each of us has seen God during the week, and we've grown deeper and closer because of that. Not to mention the unbelievable gift of being a pastor who gets to glean wisdom from his family weekly has corrected a trend that dominated the early years of my ministry. I work with the young, and like many, know that the church is in numerical decline, and without young people is destined to simply die. However, the rich experiences and lives present in these little churches makes the idea of courting the young seem somewhat like folly to me. For all my rhetorical ecclesiology, I truly just wanted to have a cool church that other people talked about. But now I want to only continue growing with my little faith families. We don't have a marketing budget. We do have a website now, but one church sign that is on its last legs, obviously this was written before 2020, one church sign that is gone and will be replaced shortly, and another church whose sign is perpetually behind a giant shrub. We have very few community programs. Ours is a church dedicated to staying small, growing deep, and welcoming anyone God brings to our doors. And God has brought us a surprising collection of people. And this is where my scholarship has helped, because I'm hoping to set everyone free from the pressure to go back to the glory days by reminding us all that the ebbs and flows that they taught me about the crops also apply to our sacred little communities. Something has not gone wrong. The church in Canada is just in a different season, and this season does have chores of its own. My study of history has provided stories and people that have shaped the world for the past 2,000 years. And I get to remind my faith families that such a legacy means Westover and Mountsburg will exist for as long as God needs them, not 1 second more or less. So to conclude, what does the future hold for these small communities in underpopulated sections of Canada? Well, thanks to my role as a professor, I have colleagues and friends who do research into this and provide me with tremendous sociological, theological, ecclesiological, and pastoral resources few other pastors can claim. I know the importance of real estate data, as well as medieval theologians and 21st century farming techniques. These churches are bucking the trend by remaining small and simply doing things that amuse them, like annual variety shows, pig roasts, and collecting scrap metal from farmers. And somehow both have some legs to remain on the landscape of Canada for quite some time. I am grateful for the opportunity to reflect upon my time at Mountsburg and Westover as a professor, and how these two facets of my life, while complementary, have different appeals to me. I cannot help but joke about board meetings when I teach on wars and Christian history. I cannot help but bring in ideas, and occasionally students, from the classroom to see what my Sunday people think. Both students and parishioners benefit from the practical advice and experience of an academic pastor. Both students and parishioners, in some beautiful instances, have been set free from ideas that have actually been harming them. My propensity is to think that the church life keeps me honest and grounded and informs my teaching much more than the other way around. However, after a decade of ministry in the country has shown me the power of language and the need for Christians, no matter what kind of church they attend, to be a people who think. I would not have learned about the rhythms of life or the power of community without my little faith families. but nor would I have had the capacity to reflect on and speak about this deep spirituality that underpins such things if I were not a professor. And so I return to the image of Aquinas that hangs in my cozy country room, surrounded by my own books and trappings of the academy. I am pleased, because it seems that when it comes to bivocational ministry, my life appears to be imitating that art. The end.
The end.
20 minutes. Ooh, that was long.